My late wife's last gift to me was a horse. My daughter-in-law had him put down without asking, saying it was for safety. I was devastated. Then 3 days later, I saw him alive in the stable, kicking frantically at the new concrete floor my DIL had poured. When I saw what was on the other side, I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you are watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought I could feel more empty than the day I buried my wife Megan. But standing in our empty stable 3 months later, staring at the spot where Thunder used to stand, I realized grief has layers. Some wounds cut so deep they expose other wounds underneath. Thunder wasn't just a horse. He was Megan's last gift to me. Her final act of love before cancer took her away. She spent her last weeks in that hospital bed, worrying about what would happen to him after she was gone. "Promise me you'll take care of Thunder, Stanley," she had whispered, her voice barely audible above the beeping machines. "He's going to need you as much as you need him." I promised her. I meant it with every fiber of my being. For the 3 months after her funeral, Thunder and I had developed our own routine. Every morning at 6, I would walk out to the stable with his feed, and he would greet me with that soft, nickering sound that horses make when they're happy to see you. It was the only thing that made me smile anymore. Megan used to say that Thunder could sense emotions better than most people. She wasn't wrong. On the days when the grief felt like it might swallow me whole, he would rest his massive head against my shoulder and just stand there with me. No judgment, no empty platitudes about time healing all wounds, just presence. That's why what happened 2 days ago still doesn't feel real. I was in town picking up groceries when Sophia called. My daughter-in-law's voice was calm, matter-of-fact, the way she always sounded when she was handling what she called practical matters. "Stanley, I need to tell you something about Thunder," she said without any preamble. "I had to make a difficult decision today." My hands tightened around the phone. "What kind of decision?" "I called the veterinarian. Thunder has been showing signs of aggression lately, and with your age, I was concerned about your safety. Dr. Martinez agreed that it was the responsible thing to do." The words didn't make sense at first. What was the responsible thing to do? "We put him down, Stanley. I'm sorry, but it was for your own good." The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the grocery store floor. Other shoppers stared as I stood there, frozen, trying to process what I had just heard. Thunder was gone. My last connection to Megan, my daily source of comfort in this empty house, was gone. And I hadn't even been there to say goodbye. When I finally made it home, Sophia was waiting in my kitchen, her perfectly styled blonde, hair not a strand out of place despite what she claimed had been such a difficult day. She looked up from her coffee cup with an expression that was probably supposed to be sympathy but looked more like satisfaction. "I know this is hard," she said, standing up to give me what felt like a rehearsed hug. "But Thunder was getting unpredictable. Last week when I came to check on you, he pinned his ears back at me. That's a sign of aggression. I couldn't risk you getting hurt." I pulled away from her embrace, my mind struggling to make sense of what she was telling me. Thunder has never shown aggression toward anyone. Megan rode him until the week before she went into the hospital. Sophia's expression shifted slightly, a tiny crack in her concerned facade. "Stanley, I know this is emotional for you, but sometimes we don't see what we don't want to see. Thunder was a large animal, and at 65 you're not as steady on your feet as you used to be." The way she said it, like I was a child who needed to be protected from my own poor judgment, made something hot and angry rise in my chest. But I was too stunned, too broken by the news to argue. "Where is he?" I asked quietly. "Dr. Martinez took care of everything. The remains were disposed of properly." She said it like she was talking about taking out the trash. I walked out to the stable anyway, hoping somehow this was all a mistake, that Thunder would be there waiting for his evening feed. But the stall was empty. Not just empty. It had been cleaned so thoroughly it looked like no horse had ever lived there at all. That night I sat in Megan's chair in the living room, holding a picture of her and Thunder from last Christmas. In the photo she was laughing as Thunder tried to eat the decorative bow from her coat. He looked so gentle, so content. The idea that this same horse had become aggressive enough to require euthanasia seemed impossible. But Sophia was family now. She married my son David 2 years ago, and since Megan's death, she had been the one checking on me, bringing groceries, handling appointments I forgot to make. If she said Thunder was dangerous, if Dr. Martinez agreed, then maybe I was being sentimental. Maybe my grief was making me blind to the reality of the situation. The next morning I called David at his office in Atlanta. He's been working in finance there for the past 5 years, only making it home for holidays and major events. When I told him about Thunder, his response was immediate and predictable. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I know how much that horse meant to you and Mom. But Sophia was right to be concerned about your safety. She's been worried about you being out there alone with such a large animal." "Your mother never worried about Thunder," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. There was a pause. "Dad, Mom wasn't thinking clearly toward the end. You know that. The medication, the pain. She wasn't making the best decisions." The words hit like a slap. David hadn't been here during Megan's final weeks. He hadn't seen how clear and purposeful she was about Thunder's care, how she made me promise to look after him, but Sophia had been here, helping with Megan's care, earning my son's eternal gratitude for her devotion during such a difficult time. "Sophia loves you, Dad," David continued. "She's trying to take care of you the way Mom would have wanted. Maybe it's time to think about some of the options we discussed. That retirement community in town has excellent facilities, and you wouldn't have to worry about property maintenance or caring for animals." I hung up without responding. David meant well, but he was seeing this situation through Sophia's eyes, not mine. To him, I was becoming a burden that needed to be managed. Thunder's death wasn't a tragedy. It was a problem solved. I spent the rest of that day wandering around the house, picking up reminders of the life Megan and I had built together. 43 years of marriage, and now I was alone with nothing but photographs and the growing suspicion that the people who claimed to care about me were slowly dismantling everything that mattered to me. But it was the silence that got to me the most. For 3 months I had started each day with the sound of Thunder's greeting, the rhythm of his movements in the stable, the comforting routine of caring for something that depended on me. Now there was nothing but the hollow echo of my footsteps in an empty house. That evening, as I sat on the back porch looking out at the empty pasture, I realized Sophia was right about one thing. I wasn't as young as I used to be. My hands shook more than they used to, my balance wasn't what it had been, and some days the grief made it hard to think clearly. But Thunder had never been a threat. If anything, he had been my anchor, the one constant that kept me grounded in a world that felt like it was spinning out of control. As darkness fell, I made a decision. Tomorrow I would visit Dr. Martinez and ask him about Thunder's final day. I needed to understand what had happened, what signs of aggression Sophia had seen that I had missed. I owed it to Megan's memory to know the truth about her beloved horse. What I didn't know was that my search for answers would lead me to discoveries that would shake everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. The next morning I drove to Dr. Martinez's veterinary clinic with a heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with the humid Georgia air. The 20-minute drive gave me too much time to think, to replay every interaction I'd had with Thunder in his final days. Had I missed something? Had grief made me blind to signs that Sophia had seen clearly? Dr. Martinez had been our veterinarian for over 15 years. He delivered 3 of Thunder's siblings, treated his injuries, and had been there the day Megan first brought him home as a 2-year-old. If anyone would know about Thunder's temperament, it would be him. The clinic was busy when I arrived, but the receptionist, Maria, recognized me immediately. "Mr. Holloway, I'm so sorry for your loss. First Mrs. Holloway and now Thunder. How are you holding up?" "Thank you, Maria. Is Dr. Martinez available? I wanted to talk to him about Thunder's final day." Something flickered across her face. Confusion, maybe uncertainty. "Let me check his schedule," she said, though her tone had changed subtly. Dr. Martinez emerged from an examination room 10 minutes later, a golden retriever trailing behind him with a cone around its neck. When he saw me, his expression shifted from professional pleasantness to something more complicated. "Stanley," he said, extending his hand. "I was sorry to hear about Thunder. How can I help you today?" "I wanted to thank you for handling everything with Thunder," I began. "Sophia said you agreed it was the right decision, given his aggressive behavior." Dr. Martinez's handshake lingered a moment longer than usual. His dark eyes searched my face with an intensity I couldn't quite read. "Stanley, can we talk in my office?" He led me down a hallway lined with pictures of animals he'd treated over the years. I spotted Thunder in one of them, a photo from when he was just 3 years old, standing proudly next to Megan after winning his first local horse show. Dr. Martinez closed the office door behind us and gestured for me to sit, but instead of settling behind his desk, he remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back. "Stanley, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. When exactly did I examine Thunder for aggressive behavior?" The question caught me off guard. "Sophia said she called you 2 days ago. She said you agreed that he needed to be put down for safety reasons." Dr. Martinez sat down slowly, his expression grave. "Stanley, I haven't examined Thunder in over 6 months. The last time I saw him was for his routine vaccinations in February, and I certainly haven't euthanized him." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean you haven't euthanized him?" "I mean Thunder isn't dead as far as I know, at least not by my hand." He leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Stanley, I need you to tell me exactly what Sophia told you." My hand started shaking as I recounted the phone call. Sophia's explanation about Thunder's aggression, the claim that Dr. Martinez had handled everything. With each detail, his frown deepened. "Stanley, if Thunder has been euthanized, it wasn't done by this clinic, and if someone told you I recommended it based on aggressive behavior, they were lying to you." The room felt like it was spinning. "But where is he then?" "His stall was completely empty when I got home." "I don't know, but I think we need to find out." Dr. Martinez reached for his phone. "I'm going to call the other veterinarians in the area. If Thunder was euthanized, there will be records. There have to be." I sat in that chair for the next 30 minutes while Dr. Martinez made call after call. Each conversation was the same. No one had any record of treating or euthanizing Thunder. No one had even been contacted about him. As Dr. Martinez hung up from his final call, the truth began to settle in my stomach like a cold stone. Sophia had lied to me. But if Thunder wasn't dead, where was he? "Stanley," Dr. Martinez said carefully, "I think you need to go home and look around your property very carefully. Check every building, every pasture. If Thunder is alive, he might still be somewhere on your land." The drive home felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. My mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. If Sophia hadn't had Thunder euthanized, what had she done with him? And why would she lie about something so devastating? When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Sophia's car parked next to my front porch. She was sitting on the swing where Megan used to spend her evenings, looking perfectly composed as she waved at me. "Stanley, I was just coming to check on you. How are you feeling today?" I studied her face, looking for any sign of guilt or deception, but she looked exactly the same as always. Concerned, caring, maybe slightly patronizing in the way she had of treating me like I needed constant supervision. "I'm fine," I said carefully. "Just been thinking about Thunder." "Oh, sweetie," she said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. "I know yesterday was hard, but you'll see. In a few weeks you'll realize this was for the best. You have so much more energy already without having to worry about caring for him." The casual way she dismissed Thunder's death, or whatever had happened to him, made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I was thinking I might walk around the property today," I said, watching her reaction carefully. "Maybe clean out some of the old outbuildings." For just a moment, something flashed across her face. Alarm? Panic? But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Oh, Stanley, you shouldn't be doing that kind of physical work alone. Why don't you wait until David can come help you? Or better yet, we could hire someone to clean everything out. There's really no need for you to go poking around in dusty old buildings." The more insistent she became that I avoid the outbuildings, the more certain I became that I needed to search them immediately. "I think I'll just take a quick look around," I said, starting to walk toward the barn. Sophia fell into step beside me, her heels clicking on the gravel path. "Really, Stanley, there's nothing out there but old junk and spider webs. Why don't we go inside and I'll make you some lunch instead?" But I was already at the barn door, pushing it open. The familiar smell of hay and leather hit me, along with something else, something that made my pulse quicken. The barn looked different somehow. Tools had been moved, and there was fresh sawdust scattered across the floor in places where it didn't used to be. "Stanley, come away from there," Sophia said, her voice sharper now. "You're just going to upset yourself." I ignored her and walked deeper into the barn, following an instinct I couldn't quite name. In the far corner where we used to store feed, I noticed something odd. The wooden floorboards looked newer than the rest, and there were scratch marks around the edges as if they had been pried up and replaced recently. "What happened here?" I asked, pointing to the boards. Sophia's laugh sounded forced. "Oh, that old floor was rotting. I had a handyman come fix it while you were in town yesterday. Just trying to keep the place safe, you know." But as I knelt down to examine the boards more closely, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A sound coming from underneath the floor, a rhythmic thumping like something large hitting wood from below. Sophia heard it too. The color drained from her face. "Stanley, we should go back to the house now." The thumping came again, more urgent this time, and underneath the sound of impact I heard something else. A sound I had heard every morning for 3 months. A sound I knew better than my own heartbeat. Thunder was down there. Thunder was alive. And he was trying to get out. I looked up at Sophia, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw her clearly. The concerned daughter-in-law mask had slipped, revealing something calculating and cold underneath. "What did you do to him?" I whispered. Sophia's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Below us, Thunder's desperate attempts to escape grew stronger. Whatever Sophia had planned, whatever lie she had told herself to justify her actions, I was about to uncover the truth. And I had a terrible feeling that Thunder's imprisonment was just the beginning of something much worse. My hands trembled as I grabbed a crowbar from the wall. The thumping beneath the floorboards had grown more frantic, and each impact sent vibrations through the soles of my boots. Thunder was down there, alive, trapped in some kind of makeshift prison that Sophia had created. "Stanley, stop!" Sophia's voice was no longer sweet or concerned. It was sharp, commanding, the voice of someone who was used to being obeyed. "You don't understand what you're doing." I positioned the crowbar under the edge of the newer floorboard and applied pressure. The wood creaked and groaned as it began to separate from the joist below. "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You lied to me about Thunder being dead. You lied about Dr. Martinez. And you've got my horse trapped under here like some kind of animal." "He is an animal, Stanley." The mask was completely gone now. Sophia's perfectly composed facade had cracked, revealing something ugly and desperate underneath. And he was in the way of everything we've been trying to accomplish. The first board came free with a splintering crack. Below it I could see wooden beams and what looked like a hastily constructed chamber. The smell that rose up was awful. Hay mixed with waste and fear sweat. But underneath it all was that familiar scent I knew so well, the warm smell of horse that had greeted me every morning for 3 months. "Thunder?" I called down into the darkness. The response was immediate. A nickering sound filled with relief and recognition. My heart broke and soared at the same time. He was alive. Hurt, probably terrified, but alive. I pried up another board, then another, working with an energy I hadn't felt in months. Sophia stood behind me, no longer trying to stop me, but muttering things under her breath that I couldn't quite make out. When I had cleared enough boards to see down into the chamber, the sight nearly brought me to my knees. Thunder was lying on his side in a space barely large enough to contain him. His coat was matted with sweat and dirt, and there were scratches along his neck and shoulders where he had struggled against the confines of his prison. But his eyes, those intelligent brown eyes that Megan had loved so much, were bright and alert. When he saw me, he tried to lift his head, whinnying softly in greeting. "Jesus Christ, Sophia," I breathed. "How long has he been down there?" 2 days, she said, her voice flat and matter-of-fact. "Since I told you he was dead." 2 days. For 2 days, while I had been mourning his loss, while I had been questioning my own judgment and wondering if I had failed to protect him, Thunder had been trapped in this hell that Sophia had created. Why? The question came out as barely more than a whisper. Why would you do this to him? Sophia let out a laugh that had no humor in it whatsoever. "Because you wouldn't listen to reason, Stanley. David and I have been trying to help you see sense for months, but you're too stubborn and sentimental to understand what's best for you. I climbed down into the chamber, my arthritic knees protesting every movement. Thunder struggled to stand when he saw me approaching, but the space was too small for him to get his footing properly. "Easy, boy," I murmured, running my hands over his neck and shoulders, checking for injuries. "I'm here now. I'm going to get you out." His skin was dehydrated and he was clearly weak, but nothing seemed to be broken. Sophia had given him water. I could see a bucket in the corner, but not nearly enough, and certainly not enough food for a horse his size. "You were trying to kill him slowly," I said, looking up at Sophia from the bottom of the makeshift prison. "You couldn't bring yourself to actually have him euthanized, so you decided to let him die of neglect down here?" "I was solving a problem," Sophia shot back. "Thunder was the reason you wouldn't consider moving to that retirement community. As long as you had him to take care of, you'd insist on staying in this old house, maintaining this property that's too much for you to handle." The pieces were starting to fit together in my mind, forming a picture so ugly I didn't want to believe it. "The retirement community. David mentioned that. How long have you two been planning this?" Sophia's expression shifted, becoming almost pleased, as if she was proud of her cleverness. "Stanley, you're 65 years old and living alone on 20 acres of land that requires constant maintenance. You're sitting on a property worth $300,000, and for what? So you can pretend to be a rancher with one horse." $300,000. I hadn't realized the property had appreciated that much, but then again, I hadn't been paying attention to real estate values. I'd been focused on grieving my wife and trying to honor her last wishes. "Megan left Thunder to me for a reason," I said, my voice growing stronger as anger began to replace shock. "She knew I needed something to care for, something to give my life purpose after she was gone." "Megan was dying and sentimental," Sophia snapped. "She wasn't thinking about the practical realities of your situation. David and I are. We want what's best for you, even if you're too stubborn to see it." I was still kneeling next to Thunder, but my mind was racing ahead, connecting dots I should have seen months ago. "The retirement community. Did you already put a deposit down on a place for me?" Sophia's silence was answer enough. "And this property, I suppose you've already talked to real estate agents about what it might sell for?" "We've done preliminary research," she said defensively. "We wanted to know what options were available when you were ready to make the transition." "When I was ready? Or when you decided I was ready?" I stood up slowly, my joints protesting the movement. "How exactly were you planning to convince me to sell, Sophia? What was the next step in your plan?" For the first time since I'd started prying up the floorboards, Sophia looked uncertain. "Stanley, you're making this sound more sinister than it is. We just want you to be safe and comfortable in your later years." "By trapping my horse in a makeshift grave and letting me think he was dead." I climbed out of the chamber and faced her directly. "By lying to me about veterinarians and aggressive behavior and safety concerns. Tell me, Sophia, what other lies have you been telling me? What other safety concerns have you and David discussed?" She took a step back and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much damage had been done to whatever plan she had been executing. "We've talked about getting you some help around the house," she said carefully. "Maybe someone to check on you during the day, help with medications and appointments." "Someone to keep an eye on me, you mean? Someone to make sure I'm taking the medications you think I should be taking?" The picture was getting clearer and uglier by the minute. "What kind of medications, Sophia? Something to help with my confusion, maybe? Something to make me more compliant?" "Stanley, you're being paranoid." But I wasn't being paranoid enough, and I was starting to realize it. I thought about the past few months, the way Sophia had gradually increased her involvement in my daily life. The way she had started bringing me groceries without being asked, handling appointments I could have managed myself, asking questions about my finances and legal documents. "Where are Megan's medical records?" I asked suddenly. "What?" "Megan's medical records. The files from her oncologist, the hospital records, the insurance paperwork. I haven't seen them since the funeral. Did you help me organize them?" Sophia's face had gone very pale. "I don't remember exactly where we put those. But I did remember. I remembered Sophia offering to help me organize Megan's papers, taking boxes of documents to sort through and file properly. Documents that included not just medical records, but financial information, insurance policies, property deeds. "You've been studying my situation for months," I said, the full scope of her betrayal beginning to dawn on me. "Learning about my assets, my vulnerabilities, my routines. Thunder wasn't just in the way of your plan. He was the one thing keeping me grounded, keeping me from becoming the confused old man you needed me to be." Below us, Thunder whinnied softly, reminding me that he was still trapped, still in need of immediate help. But now I understood that saving him was about more than rescuing a horse. It was about saving myself from a trap that had been closing around me for months. "You're going to help me get Thunder out of there," I told Sophia, my voice carrying an authority I hadn't used in months. "And then you're going to tell me exactly what you and David have been planning for my future." Sophia's jaw set in a hard line. "And if I refuse?" I looked down at Thunder, then back at her. "Then I call the police and tell them you've been torturing an animal and attempting to defraud an elderly man? How do you think that will play out for you, Sophia?" The silence stretched between us, filled only by Thunder's labored breathing and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Whatever came next, I knew my life would never be the same. The question was whether I still had enough fight left in me to reclaim it. It took us nearly 2 hours to get Thunder out of that makeshift prison. Sophia helped, but only because I made it clear that refusing would mean police involvement. She worked in sullen silence, handling the ropes and makeshift ramp we constructed with the efficiency of someone who had clearly thought about this process before. Thunder was weaker than I had initially thought. When we finally got him up and out into the daylight, his legs trembled with the effort of standing. I called Dr. Martinez immediately, and he arrived within 30 minutes with IV fluids and a grim expression that told me he understood exactly what kind of situation he was walking into. Dehydration, stress, some superficial injuries from struggling against confinement, he diagnosed after examining Thunder thoroughly. "He'll recover, but this could have killed him in another day or 2. Sophia stood off to the side during the examination, her arms crossed, watching Dr. Martinez work with an expression I couldn't quite read. When he finished and began preparing to leave, she finally spoke. "Doctor, I hope you understand that this was a misunderstanding. Stanley has been having some confusion lately, and I was trying to help manage a difficult situation." Dr. Martinez looked at her for a long moment, then at the boards we had pried up from the barn floor, then at Thunder standing unsteadily in his old stall. "Ma'am, there's no confusion about what I see here. This animal was deliberately imprisoned in a space designed to cause suffering. That's not a misunderstanding. That's cruelty." After he left, Sophia and I faced each other across the barn. The pretense of caring daughter-in-law was completely gone now, replaced by something harder and more calculating. "You can't prove I intended any harm," she said. "And who do you think David is going to believe? His wife or his father, who's been showing increasing signs of memory problems and poor judgment?" "Memory problems?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let me guess. You've been documenting those, haven't you? Keeping track of every time I forgot an appointment or misplaced something. Every moment of grief-related confusion you could interpret as cognitive decline." Sophia's slight smile told me I was right. "David loves you, Stanley, but he's worried about you. We both are. Living alone out here, isolated from medical care, insisting on maintaining a property that's clearly too much for you to handle. The incident with Thunder just proves how dangerous your situation has become." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What incident with Thunder?" "The one where you became confused and accidentally trapped him under the barn floor. Thank goodness I found him before he died." She was rewriting history in real time, creating a narrative where she was the hero and I was the confused old man who needed to be saved from himself. It was so audacious, so completely evil, that for a moment I could only stare at her. "You think you can convince David that I trapped Thunder myself?" "I think David wants to believe the best about both of us," Sophia said carefully. "But he's also a practical man who understands that difficult decisions sometimes have to be made for the good of the people we love." That's when I realized that this conversation wasn't happening by accident. Sophia was testing her story on me, seeing how believable it sounded, refining the details, which meant she had already started implementing whatever plan came next. "What have you told him about today?" I asked. "I called him an hour ago. I told him I found you in the barn. trying to dig up Thunder because you thought you could bring him back to life. I said I was concerned about your mental state and thought he should come home as soon as possible. My blood turned to ice. David was on his way here, driving down from Atlanta with Sophia's version of events already planted in his mind. By the time he arrived, she would have had hours to reinforce her story, to paint me as increasingly unstable and dangerous. "David's a smart man," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He'll see through your lies." "Will he?" Sophia tilted her head, studying me like I was an interesting specimen. "David sees you maybe 4 times a year, Stanley. I see you every week. I'm the one who's been documenting your confusion, your forgetfulness, your inability to maintain basic household routines. I'm the one who's been researching memory care facilities and adult day programs because I'm worried about your safety." The scope of her planning was staggering. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision to get rid of Thunder. This was months of careful groundwork, building a case for my incompetence that would justify whatever actions she and David decided to take. "You've been planning this since Megan died," I said. "I've been planning this since before Megan died," Sophia corrected. "Do you think it was an accident that I became so involved in her care during those final weeks? I needed to understand your financial situation, your living arrangements, your vulnerabilities. Megan's illness provided the perfect opportunity to insert myself into your lives." The casual way she talked about manipulating my dying wife made me feel physically sick. "Megan trusted you. She was grateful for your help. Megan was dying and desperate for someone to take care of you after she was gone. I made sure she saw me as that someone." Sophia's voice was flat, clinical. "She even told me where you kept important documents, gave me insights into your routines and preferences. She made my job much easier." "Your job?" "Preparing for your transition to assisted living, making sure you had family support during the difficult adjustment period, ensuring that your assets were properly managed and protected." Each word was chosen carefully, designed to sound caring and responsible, but I heard the real message underneath. She had been studying me like a mark, learning my weaknesses so she could exploit them more effectively. "The retirement community," I said. "How much does a place there cost?" "The one we've been looking at is about $4,000 per month, very reasonable for the level of care provided." $4,000 per month, $48,000 per year. I did some quick math in my head. With my Social Security and Megan's small pension, I could afford maybe half that amount. The rest would have to come from liquidating assets. "You'd need to sell the property to afford it," I said. "We'd need to sell the property to afford it," Sophia corrected. "David and I would be handling your financial affairs, of course. You'd be free to focus on your health and happiness without worrying about money management or property maintenance." The picture was complete now. Sophia and David would sell my land for $300,000, use the proceeds to pay for my care in a facility where I would have no independence and no control over my own life. Any money left over after my death would presumably go to David as my only heir. "And if I refused to go along with this plan?" Sophia's smile was ice cold. "Stanley, you just spent the afternoon digging up what you thought was your dead horse because you were convinced he was still alive. You've been talking to an empty stall for 2 days, having conversations with an animal you believed was deceased. Does that sound like someone who's capable of making rational decisions about his own welfare?" I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again. Because she was right about one thing. My behavior would sound crazy to anyone who didn't know the truth about what she had done. And she was betting that David would never hear the truth from my perspective. "David's going to be here in about 3 hours, Sophia continued. "By the time he arrives, you're going to be very upset and confused about Thunder's condition. You're going to need comfort and support, and you're going to be grateful that your family is here to help you through this difficult time. And if I tell him what really happened, then you'll sound like a paranoid old man making wild accusations against the daughter-in-law who's been sacrificing her time and energy to take care of you." Sophia checked her watch. "I think I'll call Dr. Martinez back and ask him to return. I'm concerned about your mental state after the stress of this afternoon. He might have some recommendations for managing your confusion and agitation." I felt the walls closing in around me. Sophia had been planning this for months, laying groundwork, building credibility, positioning herself as the responsible family member while painting me as increasingly incompetent. Even Thunder's rescue could be turned against me if she got to control the narrative. But she had made one mistake. She had revealed her plan too early, shown me the full scope of her manipulation before David arrived. That gave me a small window of opportunity, if I was smart enough to use it. "You're right," I said, letting my shoulders slump in defeat. "I have been confused lately. Maybe it would be good to have some family support while I figure things out." Sophia's smile became genuine for the first time all day. "I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this, Stanley. David and I only want what's best for you." "I know," I said, "and I appreciate everything you've done to help me during this difficult time." She nodded, satisfied that she had won. But as I watched her walk back toward the house, already pulling out her phone to call David with an update, I was making plans of my own. Sophia had been collecting evidence of my alleged incompetence for months. It was time for me to start collecting evidence of my own. Evidence that would show exactly who the real threat was in this family. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. David arrived just after sunset, his face etched with worry and exhaustion from the 4-hour drive from Atlanta. I watched from the kitchen window as Sophia met him in the driveway, her performance beginning before he even got out of the car. Her body language was perfect. Concerned but trying to stay strong, the devoted daughter-in-law bearing a difficult burden. I had spent the 3 hours since our barn confrontation carefully preparing for this moment. While Sophia had been on the phone with David, I had been busy gathering evidence. My old digital camera, the one Megan had bought me for Christmas 2 years ago, had gotten quite a workout documenting Thunder's condition, the makeshift prison under the barn floor, and the scratches and tool marks that showed how recently the boards had been installed. I also made several phone calls. The first was to my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who lived about half a mile down the road. She confirmed what I already knew. No veterinarian had come to my property in the past week. She would have seen Dr. Martinez's truck, since he always used our shared road to access my barn. The second call was to my bank. I asked them to print out statements for the past 6 months, specifically any transactions I hadn't initiated myself. What I learned made my blood boil. Sophia had been using a debit card linked to my account to make purchases I knew nothing about. Groceries, yes, but also payments to contractors, medical supply companies, and something called Senior Life Solutions. The third call was the most important one. I reached out to Tom Bradley, a lawyer who had handled Megan's will and estate planning. Tom had known our family for 15 years, and when I explained my situation, he agreed to come out to the house immediately. Tom arrived 20 minutes before David did, parking his car out of sight behind the barn. He spent those 20 minutes reviewing the photographs I had taken and listening to my account of the day's events. When I finished, his expression was grim. "Stanley, what you're describing could constitute elder abuse, fraud, and animal cruelty. But you're right to be concerned about credibility. Sophia has been very clever about building a case for your incompetence. Can you help me? I can document what I see here today, and I can make sure you have legal representation if this goes where I think it's going." Tom looked toward the house, where lights were beginning to come on. "But ultimately, your son is going to have to decide who he believes." Now watching David embrace Sophia in the driveway, I felt my stomach clench with anxiety. In 38 years of being his father, I had never had to compete for his trust. The idea that my own son might choose to believe the worst about me was almost unbearable. But I thought about Thunder, weak and traumatized in his stall, and I found my resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about stopping someone who was willing to torture an innocent animal to achieve her goals. David and Sophia came through the front door together, their voices carrying down the hallway toward the kitchen. "Is he in his room?" David was asking. "No, I think he's in the kitchen. He's been very agitated since this afternoon. David, I'm really worried about him." They appeared in the doorway, David's face a mask of concern that broke my heart. At 35, he looked more like Megan every year. The same dark hair, the same serious expression when he was thinking through a problem. He had inherited her practical nature and her desire to fix things that were broken. "Dad," he said, crossing the room to embrace me. "Sophia told me what happened with Thunder. I'm so sorry you're going through this." I hugged him back, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne, feeling the solid warmth of my only child. For a moment I wanted to believe that everything would be okay, that David would listen to me and see through Sophia's lies. "It's been a difficult day," I said carefully. "But not for the reasons Sophia told you." David pulled back, studying my face. "What do you mean?" Sophia stepped forward quickly. "Stanley has been very confused since I found him in the barn. I think the stress of losing Thunder has been harder on him than any of us realized." "Thunder isn't lost," I said quietly. "He's in his stall, recovering from 2 days of imprisonment under the barn floor." The silence that followed was deafening. David looked from me to Sophia and back again, trying to process what I had just said. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Sophia didn't have Thunder euthanized," I explained, keeping my voice calm and factual. "She trapped him in a chamber under the barn floor and told me he was dead. I found him this afternoon when I heard him trying to escape." David's expression shifted to something between confusion and alarm. That doesn't make any sense. Sophia wouldn't do something like that. She did it because Thunder was interfering with her plan to convince you that I'm incompetent and need to be moved to assisted living." "Dad, you're scaring me." David's voice was gentle but firm. "Let's sit down and talk about this calmly." Sophia placed her hand on David's arm. "I told you he's been having episodes. This afternoon he was absolutely convinced that Thunder was still alive, even though he watched Dr. Martinez take the body away yesterday." "That's a lie," I said, my voice sharpening despite my efforts to stay calm. "Dr. Martinez hasn't been here in 6 months. I called him this morning to verify that." David sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs. "Okay, let's take this step by step. Dad, are you saying Thunder is alive right now?" "Yes. He's in his stall. Dr. Martinez examined him this afternoon and confirmed that he had been confined in a space too small for him to stand properly without adequate food or water." "Dr. Martinez was here this afternoon?" "Yes, because I called him when I found Thunder trapped under the barn." David rubbed his temples, looking exhausted. "Sophia, you said Dr. Martinez euthanized Thunder yesterday." For the first time since David arrived, Sophia looked uncertain. Yes, that's what I told Stanley. But David, you have to understand, he's been having these delusions about Thunder being alive. I was trying to help him process his grief by confirming what he seemed to believe." "So you lied to him about the euthanasia?" "I was trying to be therapeutic. Sometimes we have to meet people where they are mentally, especially when they're dealing with dementia symptoms." The word dementia hung in the air like a weapon. I saw David's expression shift, the way he looked at me changing subtly. Sophia had planted the seed, and now she was watering it. "I don't have dementia," I said firmly. "And I can prove that everything I've told you is true. Thunder is in his stall right now. The barn floor has been torn up where Sophia had him imprisoned. Dr. Martinez's records will show that he treated Thunder today for dehydration and confinement injuries." David stood up slowly. "Okay, let's go look at Thunder." The three of us walked out to the barn together, David's silence heavy with tension. When we reached Thunder's stall, I felt a moment of triumph. Thunder was standing, looking much better after Dr. Martinez's treatment, turning toward us with a gentle nicker of recognition. "Jesus," David breathed. "He's alive." "Of course he's alive," Sophia said smoothly. "Stanley, you never told David that you were confused about whether Thunder was dead or not. I've been trying to help you work through your grief by acknowledging your belief that he was still here." But David wasn't listening to her anymore. He was looking at the torn-up barn floor, at the clear evidence of recent construction work, at the scratches on Thunder's coat that spoke of struggle and confinement. "Show me where he was trapped," David said quietly. I led him to the corner where we had pried up the boards. The improvised chamber was still visible, smelling of fear and waste. David knelt down and examined the space, the size clearly designed for a horse, the water bucket in the corner, the evidence of desperate attempts to escape. When he stood up, his face was white. "Someone built this. Recently." "I built it," I said, knowing that Sophia would use any lie to cover her tracks. I was confused and thought Thunder needed a special place to rest. But David was smarter than Sophia gave him credit for. He examined the tool marks on the boards, the fresh sawdust, The way the chamber had been designed with just enough space to keep Thunder alive, but not enough for him to be comfortable. "Dad, you don't have the physical strength to build something like this," he said slowly. "And even if you did, why would you build it in secret and then forget about it?" That's when Tom Bradley stepped out of the shadows near the barn entrance. "Because he didn't build it, David, but I have photographs and documentation of who did." Sophia's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, fear, and finally a kind of cold calculation. She had been caught, but she wasn't giving up. "David, who is this man? Why is there a stranger on your father's property?" "I'm Tom Bradley, the family's attorney," Tom said, extending his hand to David. "Your father called me this afternoon when he discovered what had been done to his horse." David shook Tom's hand automatically, his mind clearly racing. "What kind of documentation do you have?" Tom pulled out a folder containing the photographs I had taken, timestamps clearly visible on each image. Pictures of the animal in confinement, pictures of the makeshift prison, pictures of the injuries consistent with prolonged captivity. I also have witness statements from neighbors and veterinary records confirming that no euthanasia took place. As David examined the photographs, I watched Sophia's mask finally slip completely. The concerned daughter-in-law disappeared, replaced by something hard and vicious. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're all ganging up on me because you can't face the truth about Stanley's condition. David, your father is sick. He needs help. And this elaborate fantasy about me trapping a horse is just proof of how far his mental deterioration has progressed." But David had stopped listening to her. He was staring at a photograph of Thunder in the underground chamber, and I could see the exact moment when he truly understood what his wife had done. "Sophia," he said quietly, his voice carrying a tone I had never heard from him before. "Did you do this to Thunder?" She looked at him for a long moment, and I could almost see her calculating whether she could still salvage the situation with the right combination of lies and manipulation. Finally, she smiled. "Yes, I did. And I'd do it again." The words hung in the air like a confession at Judgment Day. Sophia had finally dropped every pretense, every careful manipulation, every sweet lie. She stood there in my barn, surrounded by evidence of her cruelty, and admitted to torturing my horse with the casual indifference of someone discussing the weather. David's face went through a transformation I had never seen before. The concerned son disappeared, replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone capable of real anger. "You trapped a living animal under the floor and let Dad think it was dead," he said slowly, as if he needed to say the words aloud to believe them. "You tortured Thunder for 2 days while Dad grieved for him." "I solved a problem," Sophia replied, her voice taking on that same clinical tone she had used with me earlier. "Stanley was never going to agree to assisted living as long as he had that horse to worry about. I eliminated the obstacle by nearly killing an innocent animal." Sophia shrugged. "I gave him water. He would have been fine for a few more days until Stanley was safely settled in his new facility." The casual brutality of it seemed to hit David like a physical blow. He took a step back from his wife as if she had become something dangerous that he needed to keep at a distance. "What facility?" he asked. "Sunset Manor. They have an opening next month. I've already submitted the application and put down the deposit." Sophia's mask was completely gone now, replaced by someone who was proud of her efficiency. The property appraisal came in at $310,000, more than enough to cover the first few years of care. "You appraised my father's property without his knowledge. Someone had to be practical about his future, David. Stanley certainly wasn't going to do it himself." Tom Bradley stepped forward, his lawyer instincts clearly engaged. "Mrs. Holloway, did you access Mr. Holloway's bank accounts to pay for any of these services?" Sophia's hesitation told us everything we needed to know. "I was helping him manage his finances. He's been forgetting to pay bills, making poor decisions. Someone needed to take responsibility." Tom opened his briefcase and pulled out bank statements. "These show withdrawals and payments made without Mr. Holloway's knowledge. That constitutes financial elder abuse under Georgia law." For the first time since her confession, Sophia looked genuinely worried. "David, you know I would never do anything to hurt your father. Everything I've done has been for his own good." But David was staring at her like he had never seen her before. "You tortured his horse, Sophia. You stole his money. You lied to both of us for months. How is any of that for his own good? Because he's not capable of taking care of himself. The words exploded out of her with a fury that made Thunder shift nervously in his stall. Look at him, David. He's 65 years old, living alone on property he can't maintain, talking to a horse like it's his best friend. He's one fall away from being helpless, one medical emergency away from being a burden on everyone around him. So you decided to make that decision for him? I decided to be realistic about what was coming. Your father is going to need care, David, expensive care, and this property is the only asset he has to pay for it. Sophia's voice became pleading, desperate. I was trying to protect both of you from having to make harder decisions later. David looked at her for a long moment, then turned to me. Dad, did you ask Sophia to handle any of your finances? No, I said quietly. I didn't know she had access to my accounts until today. Did you ask her to research assisted living facilities? No, I never expressed any interest in leaving this property. David nodded slowly as if pieces of a puzzle were finally fitting together in his mind. And the confusion she's been telling me about, the memory problems, the poor judgment. I thought carefully before answering. I've been grieving, David. I've been sad and distracted, and sometimes forgetful about things that didn't seem important. But I haven't been confused about major decisions or unable to care for myself. Tom Bradley spoke up. I've been observing Mr. Holloway for the past several hours. His thinking is clear, his memory is sharp, and his judgment appears sound. Nothing I've seen suggests any form of cognitive impairment. Sophia let out a bitter laugh. Of course you'd say that. You are his lawyer. You want to keep billing him for services. But David wasn't listening to her anymore. He was looking at Thunder, at the evidence of what his wife had done, at the trap she had been building around his father for months. How long? He asked quietly. How long what? How long have you been planning this? The assisted living, the property sale, all of it? Sophia's silence stretched too long, confirming what I already suspected. Since before Mom died, I said. She told me herself. She was studying our situation, learning about our assets, positioning herself to take control after Megan was gone. David closed his eyes and I could see him replaying months of conversations, phone calls where Sophia had expressed concern about my welfare, suggestions about my future that he had thought were motivated by love. You used her death, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You used Mom's death as cover to manipulate Dad. I used the opportunity to plan for your father's future, Sophia corrected. Someone had to think ahead. Without his consent, without his input. You planned his entire life without bothering to ask him what he wanted. For the first time, Sophia seemed to realize that she had lost David completely. Her expression shifted, becoming desperate, manipulative in a way that was almost pathetic. David, you know me. You know I love your father. Everything I've done out of concern for his welfare. But David was already shaking his head. I thought I knew you, but the woman I married wouldn't torture an animal. She wouldn't steal from an elderly man. She wouldn't build an elaborate plan to take away someone's independence and dignity. Your father's dignity. Sophia's desperation was giving way to fury again. What dignity is there in a 65-year-old man living alone with a horse, talking to, empty rooms, forgetting to eat meals? I was trying to save him from becoming a pathetic old man who dies alone and isn't found for weeks. The cruelty of her words hit me like a slap, but they also clarified something important. This wasn't about my safety or welfare. This was about Sophia's discomfort with the idea of aging, with the reality that people sometimes choose solitude over security, that dignity might mean something different to me than it did to her. That's my choice to make, I said quietly. Not yours. David turned to Tom Bradley. What happens now? That depends on what your father wants to do. He could file charges for elder abuse, financial fraud, and animal cruelty. Or he could choose to handle this as a family matter, with appropriate safeguards in place. I looked at Sophia, at this woman who had inserted herself into my life during my most vulnerable moments, and tried to strip away everything that mattered to me. Part of me wanted to see her prosecuted, wanted her to face consequences for what she had done to Thunder and to me, but a larger part of me just wanted her gone. I want my property back, I said. I want my financial accounts secured so she can't access them. I want all applications to assisted living facilities withdrawn. And I want her to leave my land and never come back. Sophia looked at David expectantly, as if she still believed he might defend her, might choose their marriage over his father's welfare. David's answer was quiet but final. Pack your things, Sophia. Tonight. David, you can't be serious. We've been married for 2 years. We built a life together. We built a lie together, David corrected, based on your manipulation and my willingness to believe that you cared about my family. Sophia's composure finally cracked completely. You're going to regret this, David, both of you. When Stanley falls down the stairs, when he has a heart attack alone in this house, when he ends up dying because he was too stubborn to accept help, you'll remember that I tried to prevent it. Then that will be his choice to make, David said simply. Just like it should have been all along. Tom Bradley began gathering his papers. I'll prepare the necessary legal documents to secure your accounts and property, Stanley, and I'll make sure all the applications Sophia filed are properly withdrawn. As they discussed the practical details of undoing Sophia's plans, I walked over to Thunder's stall. He was standing more steadily now, his eyes bright and alert. When I reached out to stroke his neck, he leaned into my touch the way he always had. We're going to be okay, boy, I murmured. Both of us. 3 weeks later, I stood in the same spot, watching Thunder graze peacefully in the pasture. His physical recovery had been complete within a few days, but it had taken longer for him to trust being confined in any space, even his comfortable stall. Dr. Martinez said that was normal for animals who had experienced trauma. David had filed for divorce immediately and moved back to the house temporarily to help me implement new security measures and reorganize my financial affairs. We had spent hours talking about his marriage, about my future, about the ways Sophia had manipulated both of us. I should have seen it, he said one evening as we sat on the back porch. The way she always had suggestions about your life, the way she positioned herself as the expert on what was best for you. She was clever, I admitted, and she told you things you were already worried about. It's natural for children to worry about their aging parents. David was quiet for a long moment. Are you worried about living alone out here? It was a fair question, and one I had been thinking about myself. Sometimes, I said honestly. But I'm more worried about living somewhere that isn't my choice, surrounded by people who think they know what's best for me. What if we found a middle ground? Someone to check on you periodically, help with heavy work around the property, but let you maintain your independence? I considered it. As long as it's my choice. As long as I'm involved in the decisions. Always, David promised. The solution we eventually found was Mrs. Chen's nephew Marcus, a college student studying veterinary medicine who was happy to help with property maintenance in exchange for a small salary and the chance to gain experience with horses. He came by 3 times a week, handled the heavy lifting, and was excellent company without being intrusive. More importantly, he understood that Thunder was more than just a horse. He was a connection to Megan, a source of purpose, and a reminder that life could still hold simple pleasures, even in the midst of grief. 6 months after Sophia's departure, I received a letter from a law firm in Atlanta. She had agreed to a no-contest divorce in exchange for David not pressing charges for elder abuse. She had moved out of state and, according to David, seemed to be pursuing a relationship with another widowed man with substantial assets. I felt sorry for her next victim, but I also felt a deep sense of relief that she was no longer my problem to solve. These days, my routine is simple but satisfying. I wake up each morning and feed Thunder. We spend time together in the pasture, sometimes riding the trails that Megan and I used to love. I tend to the garden she planted, read the books she recommended, and feel her presence in the life we built together. David visits more often now, bringing his new girlfriend Sarah, who treats Thunder with the respect and affection he deserves. There's talk of grandchildren in the future, of family gatherings in the house where David grew up. I'm 66 now, and I know that someday I may need more help than Marcus can provide. When that time comes, I'll make decisions about my care based on my needs and preferences, not on someone else's idea of what my life should look like. But for now, I have Thunder. I have my land. I have my independence and my dignity intact. Megan's last gift to me wasn't just a horse. It was the reminder that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to choose how we want to live. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we have the strength to fight for that choice when others try to take it away. Every morning when thunder greets me with that soft, nickering sound, I remember that love isn't about control or manipulation. It's about trust, respect, and the willingness to let people make their own choices, even when those choices don't match our own fears or expectations. Sophia thought she was protecting me from loneliness and decline. What she was really doing was trying to protect herself from the discomfort of watching someone age on their own terms. I choose my own terms. Thunder and I both do. And that, I think, is exactly what Megan would have wanted.